not everyone can be a good leader, but a lot of people can be good leaders. But it is a skill that has to be developed. And I'm a big believer in like high performing team with the right skills, not that every single person has to have the same set of skills. Like I'd rather have experts.
Complementary skills where people
Yes,
could fill
exactly.
others.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast where we bring you the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and entrepreneurship to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Folks, my guest today on the podcast is Mandy Rassi. Mandy joined Michaels in April of 2022 as Senior Vice President, CMO, and she leads the marketing, loyalty, and customer org and its development of strategy, planning, and execution over 1,300 stores. I love Michaels. My kids love Michaels. They're awesome. It also includes seamless management of their e-com business, Makerplace, and we're going to get into it, what it's all about. And before Michaels, she was VP and Head of Marketing at Kroger, where she transformed the marketing function and worked with the team to create impactful campaigns, such as the company's 2019 Fresh for Everyone rebrand. We're going to get into it. Her time brand building at Procter & Gamble. We have a lot. Mandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for making the time. We're recording this show at the end of August, and we're talking kids are back to school, and we're not ready to end this summer. I mean, here in New York, the weather has been like finally stellar. Like every night, beautiful. We want to, be out every night, and then all of a sudden the kids are back to school. We're back in the schedules, and it's just the way it works, right?
It is. It is. And it's like you want to enjoy the summer while it's here. It's always too fast. And I'm always like, and winter is then looming, which I know some people are like, oh, fall is the best season. I'm like, fall is nice. I'm in Cincinnati. Sometimes fall is like 3 weeks long because it'll stay 90 degrees and then suddenly it'll be 40 and raining. So
Oh,
hopefully there will be fall before like the gray winter is upon us.
and then the grays come over it. Well, I deeply appreciate you making the time to join me and my audience today on the podcast. I want to get into it. And lately over the last year, I've kind of been digging a little bit more into the origin stories of incredible marketers like yourself. And I'd love to know, if you don't mind me asking, what did your parents do for a living?
I don't mind you asking. My parents worked in retail, at least when I was young, that's what they did. My dad was a buyer for a number of different companies and then ultimately was a club manager for Sam's Club, which is where he retired from. And my mom worked at Sam's Club, oh my gosh, probably for like 25 years and
They're
retired
lifers.
from there. Oh yeah, yeah. She definitely was like a lifer there, working in their regional offices. And now she actually works at Cincinnati Children's as a research coordinator there, which is a pretty cool career pivot that she took after she retired.
Do you think the day and age of people spending 20 years at companies are over? I mean, you spend time at, big P&G, Kroger's, these are big companies. Do you still see people putting in, 15, 20 years, or is that over?
No, there are definitely still people. I mean, obviously, I'm in Cincinnati. I still have lots of friends at P&G, many whom I started with quite a long time ago, who will for sure stay there until they retire, which also there, though, like retirement is like mid 50s.
Right.
So
But
and then they'll go do something else most of the time. So, no, I think there are, for some people, I think there's a lot about that that's appealing, of really knowing a place. And especially if it's a big company like the P&Gs, the Coca-Colas, there's so much that you can do to have different
right.
careers within the same, like a Google, somewhere that has the breadth and scope, or Amazon where you can go do lots of things. I do think for younger people, especially, I'm not sure that that same mindset persists. That certainly did like in our parents' generation of like, I'm going to go here, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to work hard, I'm going to retire, maybe I'm going to even have a pension.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with that dynamic not really being in play, and also I think a lot of people see moving as a way to learn faster, to move up faster, to get different
Earn
experiences.
more
And
money.
I think, yeah, earn more money. And so, I think there are lots of reasons that people move. And frankly, it's probably easier now than even 20 years ago to change jobs. Like the LinkedIn of it all, I think does a couple things. One, it makes it easier to make connections and see what's out there, but you can also just see the other types of jobs and what your peer
Visibility,
set is
of
doing.
course.
Absolutely. It's more sort of front and center. So it puts the sort of onus on us as employers to think about like, how do you get great people to stay? How do you help them continue to learn and grow and advance? And then sometimes you cross the bridge where it's like, actually, it's better for that person to go because I can't match
Right.
whatever that awesome experience is for them. And then we wish them well and hopefully paths cross again later.
Yeah, I absolutely love that perspective. But looking back on it now, I mean, the idea of the forever job. I mean, you started. I mean, you were at the P&G, back in the early days of your career. Did you think you were going to be there forever, or did you always have ambitions to try something else?
No, I thought I would be there for like 2 years. I was not a business major, like quite literally never took a business class in undergrad. I was a psychology major and had sort of put myself through school and could not take out any more loans. And for psychology, really, I needed to go to grad school. But I was like, I cannot afford to do this right now. I've got to
Hmm.
work for a little bit, save some money, pay down some of my undergrad, and somehow got hired at P&G and thought, oh, go do this for a couple of years. It'll be sort of an interesting learning experience. And then I'll go back to like the regularly scheduled programming and go to grad school to work probably more in like the clinical psychology field. And then I just fell in love with it and never
That was
got
it.
bored. I will say one thing P&G does amazingly well is like every 2 to 3 years, you're getting moved to something new. And especially if you're
So
someone who
they for
wants to.
they force you. They, I mean, they push you in that direction to say, all right, you've been here enough. Try something else.
Yes, especially earlier on in your career, and especially probably some functions more than others. I think if you're like a technologist in R&D, you're not going to
Mm.
move in the same
No,
way because you probably have specialized
you're
knowledge. But
specialized, and yeah, I get that. Wait, so you said
yeah, but
something
in like
interesting.
marketing, analytic, things like that, you'll get moved from one business, global, regional, which
Rotation. They have
suited me very
rotations.
well.
Yeah, they do a great job in that. I want to double back to something. I was talking to a friend the other day, and I'd love to get your take on this. The value and the ROI of a college education. Now, listen, we both have kids. They're on the horizon of going potentially to, continuing their education. The ROI of a higher degree now versus back when, we were in school and we graduated, I think it's different. Do you think that the college education is still worth it for the amount of debt that some of these kids are coming out of school with and being burdened versus the education that they're going to get versus being in the real world during that time or education they could get online and in other places?
I think, well, there's certainly a lot about higher education that could use some transformation. We'll just say that. I still think it's for certain career paths a necessary thing you must do. And I think it's about making the most of it. I think if you go and you just check the boxes and go to the classes, and take your tests and do what you need to do, I'm not sure it's worth it. That said, I also think it depends where you go. Like I went to a state school in Miami of Ohio, had a great experience there,
Had a good
was
time.
a psychology major, had a good time, spent a summer in Europe studying art and architecture and
We
literature
won't
as
get
a
into that. We,
psychology
we won't get into that.
major.
We won't get into that summer. Yeah, we'll leave that for leave that for another episode. Yes.
But then I also did like a big research project
Mhm.
that I had a professor overseeing my senior year, which ultimately I think was one of the reasons I was able to get hired at P&G. So I think it's about what you make of the experience. Like, do you go and seek out the extra things, the internships, the relationships with professors where you're going to learn more and go above and beyond? And then I think it depends what you want to do. Like my oldest daughter is really into art and design. And this is a very real conversation we're having right now.
Hmm.
Especially as like I've had creative as part of my organization in my last several roles, and she's looking at some of these art schools, it's like paying Ivy League tuition. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, let's talk about the ROI. I think it would be an amazing experience. And then you are going to graduate as an entry level designer, making less than what your tuition for one
Fraction of
year
it.
was. Like, does that make sense? Or do we look for a different undergrad option? And then if you want to go to grad school later, maybe that's where you invest. But I'll even like, I didn't get my MBA. I like semi jokingly say I got it at P&G, all real world learning from some really smart people in business and finance, and to this day, I would probably say I think I learned more having been at
Yep.
P&G those 2 or 3 years than had I been in any business school. So I think you just kind of have to look at, but also like I didn't want to be an investment banker. I think it
Right.
kind of just depends. I didn't want to be a doctor on what your aspirations are.
It's interesting you say that, and I've told the story before. I did not get my master's and my MBA, and I went to work at American Express, where pretty much everyone there has their MBA, and it was kind of shunned upon. Like they would look down on me in a couple of conversations, and that's a whole other story too, from a culture perspective.
Mm,
So the only time I really felt from a knowledge gap, I think there were some elements of certain financial or number critical thinking and execution that I might have would have had experience and learning in from an MBA. Like some of that kind of critical business financial acumen, where I
yeah,
think there was
I
some
agree with
pieces
that.
missing there. But as far as my own personal critical thinking, my creative skills, no way. Like that was built upon, my DNA and, what I've learned in previous careers. So you look back on your career, are there any regrets? Like, are there any regrets where you might have had an opportunity to go somewhere else and kind of follow more of that personal dream that would have aligned with your career?
I would not say I have any regrets actually. I follow my gut a lot as it relates to career choices. And I think what has served me well is moving on to a new thing, even when I'm not totally sure I know how to do it.
I like that.
And I've done that multiple times. Um, and I have no regrets about it. It's actually served me quite well. I love learning new things. That's sort of an environment that I thrive in, is when there is a lot of change and growth potential. Um, but I've taken things a little bit as they come. I will say I am not someone who, I mean, obviously I didn't even know I would be eventually working in marketing. Um, but I've never had the like, here's my 30-year plan of what
No.
I want to be doing. It's sort of like, what am I having fun doing? What do I want to learn next? And then I've used that to sort of craft my path as it comes, and taking things in balance. Like I took a very different path when I have 3 kids. When I had my first daughter, I worked 70% for almost 2 years, which was a gift to be at a company like Procter
Well,
and Gamble that gives you
that
options to do that. And then,
that
by
is
the way,
incredible.
still got
Trendsetters.
promoted a few years later after I had gone back full time. So it really didn't impact long term my career trajectory. Maybe I probably delayed that promotion by a couple of years in doing that. But for me, that was an amazing choice to have as an option. And by the way, this was not like, now more companies do this. This was like 2008.
I mean, that's
So
early.
it
It's
was
early
still pretty
adopter.
rare.
I mean, wouldn't that be
Yeah.
incredible? Wouldn't we love to see that standardization in the U.S.? Some kind of laws and regulation. I mean, for such an advanced country, quote unquote, like we're so behind the 8 ball on just standardization of proper maternity leave and care in that. It's sad.
It is sad. And it's like not just the moms, it's the dads, right? It is a
Parents,
massive
families.
change for your family to have a new baby at home. And whether it's your first, second, fifth, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
that's like, often someone is usually going through a physical recovery from
Mm-hmm.
from the pregnancy and having the baby, but it's a big adjustment. You're not sleeping, you're maybe not eating as well. Like it, I think it's hard to have 6 weeks and then
That's
be
it.
expected like, oh, you just show
It's
back up
not.
at
It's
work and
not
we're going to
even.
carry on like nothing's happened. um yeah, it's a lot. And like I said, I had all my kids when I was still at P&G, so even I had twins, I took 6 months off with them
Do they double
as
the time off
well.
when you have twins? No, they
No, no,
don't.
no, sadly. But you could
I
take up
kid.
to, at least then you could take up to a year unpaid. Honestly, no,
No.
it was more like with the twins. I was like, okay, it's been like 6 months and I'm home with twins all day,
I want to
every
go
day.
back
Like,
to
I
work.
need to go back. I called my
Hey,
boss.
can I come back? I'm ready. I'm ready. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to go. No, I love it. I want to transition and talk about leadership, and I think that leadership is something twofold. I think there's people that are born with the DNA and have the characteristics, but also something that you learn and you grow into. And some people become leaders and they transform into leaders when they're not. I know my story alone. I mean, I was not a great people leader early on in my career, but it wasn't until I really owned my own business for the last 7 years where I came into my own of being a good people leader. So everyone kind of has their own path in it. Do you remember one of those early mistakes in your leadership where you learned a tough lesson the hard way with leading people?
Yes, I will say I agree with you that I think not everyone can be a good leader, but a lot of people can be good leaders. But it is a skill that has to be developed. And I remember probably not my first time leading people, because like I started and probably had like one direct report or two direct reports. But when I got to having my first sort of bigger team, I think moving from that part of the group and the doing of it all and advocating for the team to being the leader and an advocate of the company
Mm-hmm.
was a big learning for me in terms of like, okay, what they need from me is not always just to be empathetic and listen and try to help them, which is probably my natural inclination. It's like also what they need is clarity on what we're going to do. They need decisions made. They need tough messages landed in a kind way, but absolutely in a clear way, especially when it came to like people who weren't performing. I think that was a big learning curve for me the first time I had someone who wasn't getting to where they needed to be, and figuring out how to have those candid, hard conversations of like, we are not where we need to be, and here's why. And it's my job to help hold you accountable and also help you get there. But for me, the piece of the accountability and like, it was a reframe that a boss of mine gave me, that actually the kind thing to do is to be absolutely transparent about where we are, if it's not working, why, and then to work with the person to figure out like, can we get there? And sometimes you can't. And then it's about, how do I help you find the right next
I
thing
love
in
how
the
you frame
company,
that.
not in the company. But in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have this
Scary.
hard conversation. This person's going to hate me. And learning a little bit like, my job is not actually to be their friend. It's to try to help them as best I can and minimally be completely honest. And it comes up sometimes. You have people, especially big organizations, especially ones that the pyramid super narrows as you go up. You may even have people who are good, but they're not going to get promoted. For me, learning to just be honest, if I'm like, look, I don't think this is going to happen here on the timeline that you're hoping it's going to,
Give them the choice.
give them the choice and say, I'm here to help you. I'm going to help
Just
give
letting
you
you
every
know.
opportunity I can. But sometimes it's not in the cards for reasons outside of our control even. And I think just being honest so people then can make their own decisions about that was a big learning for me, where like, you never want to let anybody down. I never want to let anybody down, and getting over that feeling like in that moment I'm letting them down. But ultimately, you're just going to let them down way more later if you don't have the straight talk,
It comes down
as
to
soon as it can.
radical. I love that take. Radical candor, managing expectations. It's, when I go back to my story, before I pivot into recruiting, I was working for Gary Vee over at Vayner, and I was having my own performance issues. Ultimately, I got let go, which yada yada, my whole story. And he always goes back to it and says, 10 years ago, that was one of the hardest conversations I had, because he said this because he wasn't in a place of being able to be fully, radical candor. He wasn't able to tell me because he didn't want to hurt my feelings. He's such an
Mm.
emotional person. It was hard for him. So that was a lesson learned from him. So let's pivot the conversation. I want to talk about now. I want to talk about Michael's. I want to talk about this current role that you're in right now and some of the great work that you're doing over there. But before I get to that, were you recruited by Michael's? I love, because as a recruiter, I love to hear these stories, especially in the executive search world, as much as you're open to sharing.
Yeah,
They come and poach you? How did this work? Let's talk about it.
it's probably a not super unique story. It was like someone hit me up on LinkedIn.
Really?
So it wasn't like,
Mhm.
I candidly was not actually really looking at that point in time. And someone just kind of hit me up. And it turned out we ended up having mutual connections.
I assume there's a high
Um,
level executive search recruiter, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Michael's had retained a recruiting firm. I don't know if I'm allowed to say
It's
who
okay.
it
Don't
is,
say it.
but
We don't talk
anyway,
about a competition.
he was fabulous. And reached out to me. And then, I kind of got dropped into the process and got excited about the role and what Michael's was trying to do. It was an interesting moment where they were about a year into being bought out by a private equity firm.
Mhm.
We're owned by Apollo. I had never done private equity. I'd only been at
Hmm.
two massive publicly traded companies at
So that's
P&G and
something of
Kroger.
interest, right? That's something you're like, in my check the box. I haven't done that yet. That could be an interesting
Yeah.
next step in my career as you're evaluating.
Yep, you got it. And what I love doing transformation work. I'm kind of a change junkie in that way. And the vision of where Michael's was and the journey that we're on now really is about a whole transformation of the company, modernizing it, getting more digital, more customer centric. The brand itself, they were very open to a reimagining of like, how do we take the DNA of this 50-year-old brand and make it more relevant so that we can grow and do what we need to do in the current time. So it was sort of just like a sweet spot of just the right thing that happened to come up. And from a life point of view, this was 2022. We were still like in a
Mm-hmm.
we still are a bit hybrid. So I was able to do it in a commuting sort of way, keeping my family sort of parked where they are here in Cincinnati. And it's been great.
Were there any concerns before with you taking the role?
I will say, I mean, for me, the concern, it's always hard to leave something you love. And I felt the
Mm.
same way when I left P&G. Like P&G changed my entire life in a different way. Kroger changed my life. I loved my team at Kroger. Hopefully some of them are listening and they know this. Like
I'm going to
I
tag them all.
tag all of
I'm
them.
going
There
to
are
tag
like
them all.
200 of them. Tag them
Oh, we're going to
all.
tag all of Kroger.
But like I absolutely loved leading that team. The work was exciting. And we had gone on not just the transformation journey of overhauling the brand, but we went through like leading a grocery store through COVID as a
Yep.
marketing organization together.
Unprecedented. No playbook for that one.
No playbook for it. And and you kind of
That's
felt
real.
like we have been through something as a group. I had no attrition on my team in those 3 years, outside of where
That's
we had done
massive.
some reorging, but like no regretted attrition. And it's really hard to leave a situation where you're like, I love the work. I love this team. I had a great relationship with my boss, Stuart Aiken, who I think incredibly highly of. But it was also like, I had hit a point of like, what I love doing is change and transformation. And we were kind of 4 years into that. My leadership team was killing it. And so, I think the what's next moment kind of came up, but yeah, it's hard to leave when you're not running away, if that makes sense. So for me, it was purely a running towards the new opportunity, the learning something new, the growth potential. But yeah, always hard to leave. And frankly, to leave like working down the street from my house to like, now
Pretty
I'm going to get
convenient.
on a plane and go to Dallas every other week.
Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Pretty convenient. And I love how you frame that though, running towards something instead of away from something. Right? Because that's the dream in everyone's career, the upward instead of getting let go and trying to figure it out, or I hate my
Yeah.
job. And you're lucky because not everyone has that. But what advice
Yeah.
would you
Well
give to
said.
somebody who may not be in that same position, right? Who may not be enjoying their job? Like how do they navigate?
Yeah. So I think it depends what your situation is. If you're not enjoying your job, but you're doing well or well enough, let's say, right? The company's happy with your performance, you're getting a paycheck every month. I think you, want to get clear on what the brief is. So if you are not happy in the role, understand why and what the criteria would be for the next role so that you don't find yourself like living the same movie again. And I find a lot of people are not very clear on the brief. So first, spending time, literally write your ideal job description down. I actually had an exec coach who had me
I
do
like
that
that.
at one point in my career. It was a
Mm-hmm.
very helpful exercise. So getting clear there, and then keep your bar high. Like I think sometimes when you get into, now it depends how bad the situation is. If
Right.
it's
Some
like
of them
I'm
you got to get
itching a
out.
little bit
Toxic.
bored, that's one thing. If you are in a toxic situation that's impacting your health, you'll probably move for other reasons. But at least being clear why you're leaving and what you're going towards and what that criteria is can be helpful. Obviously, if you've been let go and you're looking for a role, that's a very different situation. And the only advice I would have there is I am continually surprised in a good way of how much people in the network show up for you. Like even people I don't know very well. Like when I went to Kroger, we were doing this rebranding. I did not have like, you leave P&G, which is like, everyone's been a marketer. Everyone's a brand
Mm-hmm.
builder. Like they can all give you advice. Going into retail, you don't have loads of those people around. And there were people like friends of friends in the P&G network who spent a lot of time with me of like, if I were in your shoes, here's how I would think about it.
Giving.
Someone who had done it at Safeway, someone who had done it at Intel, who spent a ton of time with me to just coach me through it. And I would say, don't assume people won't help you. It's like, hit up people on
Sage
LinkedIn, even if they're
advice.
not your closest friends or your ex-boss, like someone who's a peer to you in a prior
It's
company.
abundancy mindset, right? It's
Yes.
goodwill. It's abundancy mindset. It's good people, right? Like how you do anything is how you do everything. And I do the same thing with podcasting. I love to give intel and information on how I do it and spend a few minutes here and there because it's also not. It's karma. It's just the right way to do
Yes.
things.
Agreed. And
Abundancy,
we've all
right? Like
benefited
we
from it,
all
right?
help, and
So
someone
it's like
helps
you
you,
want
you
to
help.
that cycle going.
Always, always. So I want to double back and I want to talk about Michael's a little bit. And you and I had this conversation a few weeks back when we had our first connection call. I'm gonna share a quick little story of why I love Michael's, and they're not sponsoring this episode. I mean, they could. Doesn't really align. They could, but when it comes to customer service, I mean, everybody in every role, pretty much wherever you do in your career, there's an element of customer service to it. It's how
Hmm.
you treat somebody, your clients, even internal customer service, how you interact. So, long story short, I collect concert posters, and I had this poster. We're talking 3 years back from a Dave Matthews concert at the Madison Square Garden in New York. And I bought this limited edition poster. I was excited to frame it in my house. It was a narrow vertical piece. I knew the perfect place for it on my wall. We needed something for that, and it was gorgeous. I take it to Michael's where I framed many of our art and other family collectibles and picked out a beautiful frame. Fast forward a couple of weeks, I'm calling to check in on it, and they say it's not ready yet. I call a week later, something's not ready yet, and I'm like, well, this is kind of weird. And then the manager called me back a couple of days later, actually a couple of hours later after that phone call, and he said, Adam, I don't know how to tell you this, but we lost it. Pardon my French, but shit happened. Something happened here. And I was destroyed. I was like, how am I going to get this again? That was,
Mm.
limited edition at the concert. And he said, how can we make this better? And I said, well, there's only really one place they sell them on eBay. You could buy, eBay. And he said, we'll take care of it. Not even a couple days later, they call
Wow.
me up and they say, we ordered it. I'll let you know when it comes in and we're going to cover the cost on it. We're going to make good on that. And that's exactly what they did. A few days after that, I got the call. It was ready, beautifully framed, unbelievable job they did on it, and they didn't charge me anything. And I said, you know what? Thank you. Thank you for making good on something. Because in Michael's, especially in the framing, you guys are trusted with people's prized possessions.
Yeah.
And it's important from a customer experience perspective. They could have said, hey, our policy says, you know what? You signed that receipt. We're not responsible, when it comes here. But they didn't do that. They did the right thing. And for me, that makes me a loyal customer.
Well, I'm so sorry that happened. I will also say it's super rare because one of the things I love about our framing is your whatever you're framing, your artifact, your artwork should never leave the store.
No.
Right. So we have our own plants that make the frames. So they'll make the frames in one of our two plants in Texas or North Carolina. And then the frame is shipped to the store and they assemble it there on
Right.
site. So it really is rare, but I'm very glad
It
to
was the way they
hear that
handled it.
they turned it into a good experience and made it right, which is what we would
And
hope to have happen. But we have like 50,000 people working in the stores. It's
things
a
go missing
big organization of
sometimes.
humans.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. What do you love most about your job right now at Michael's?
So Michael's is a very fun brand to work on, right? My career has been spent in the land of a lot of things that are chores, right? Laundry detergent, paper towels, diapers, grocery shopping. Uh, Customers are so excited about all things creative, right? So we exist to serve all creative people. So wherever you are in your journey with that, if you're more professional, if you are someone who's getting started, kids, adults, we want to be here to fuel the joy of creativity. And it really is a joyful brand to work on. We get a lot of space from a marketing point of view to play and do lots of fun things. Social media is huge for us. One of the things when I came in a couple years ago is we really doubled down our focus on growing the brand and building the brand in social. And what's cool about it is, one, it's been fun to see the team really blossom in that, but also to see our customers, like they're excited to engage with our brand. Where, sometimes in retail, like your Instagram comments can be the land of like the
Oh,
customer complaint line.
oh yeah, disgruntled
Uh,
customer dumping ground.
Yes, like, oh, I waited in line for too long. At Michael's, it's like people are tagging us in their posts because they want to show us what they made. We get tons, like
But,
our Halloween stuff dropped a few weeks ago.
oh,
There
it's
were
Halloween time.
customers putting up videos of the Halloween collection before we'd even posted ours because a few stores set a little bit earlier than the rest. So in that way, it's just the energy, and frankly, it's a creative brand that we get to
Of
do
course.
creative work around.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, Maker Place, and I want to talk about community. And first of all, I mean, Michael's is built for social media, right? Like in theory, it's a creator business. It's a
Yes.
creator
Mhm.
brand. I mean, people should be showing off. They should be Etsying and TikToking and how to and all these things. I mean, it's like a fertile stomping ground of creativity, and it's your role to bring it all together and make it shine. I want to talk about Maker Place and what it's all about. But my first question, as a marketer, specifically for Michael's, how do you define community?
So we think of community in a couple of ways. And I would say Maker Place is different than Michael's, but in general, it needs to be a group that people feel a part of that is in service of something. So I think, and there's actually some research, I think, to prove this, that you have to have a purpose for that community to be together.
Purpose.
And if we as the brand are the ones trying to either create or be part of that community in a big way, it puts the onus on us to have a purpose and then to help the group feel like they're getting whatever that purpose is out of it. I'll use Maker Place as the example, which is a new brand for us. It's not even quite a year old now, and it's a handmade goods marketplace. So in that sense, we have a seller community, which is incredibly important to us. So these are the people who are making, we only sell handmade goods. That's what it's all about, is authentically handmade. So we have that community of sellers who are small businesses, putting a lot of love and attention and care into these really unique, special things they're making. And then they're selling them through our site.
Love that.
And as we've gotten going, we are all about, our tagline is respect the handmade, both the people who buy it and the people who sell it. And so that community really is about celebrating and respecting all things handmade. And that's why we come together with that seller group, is frankly, in that case, to help them be successful. They help each other a ton, which is awesome. We have a Facebook group
Breeding community
for just our sellers. Yes. And half the time someone's saying, I'm getting stuck on this, or I haven't gotten
They're all
my
helping
first
each other.
order. And they all jump in. And the best ones are when someone does get their first order, it's like, that is awesome. Well done. Here's what you might do to get
Positive,
XYZ.
supportive environment. I love that.
Yeah.
Right. They're all, it's sharing, and it's and it goes back to what we were talking about before. And it's a theme in your career. It's a theme what you're doing now is creating a platform of abundancy. It's helping each other. That's really what was there in the process of Maker Place, was there maybe, from, if we're looking like textbook marketing, was there an early assumption that maybe was, I don't want to say proven wrong in a negative way, but like, oh, wow, we thought something, but it actually turned out to be better?
I think figuring out how to build this brand, it can be tempting to say, like, oh, we need a big video campaign to launch it. And,
Traditional
you know,
stuff.
you want to do the brand campaign in this way or that way. And I will say our creative agency, Oberlin, did do an amazing video. You can look it up on YouTube. It's Respect the Handmade.
Link it up.
Link it up.
Link it up right here.
Really amazing.
Video guy, Jeffrey, link it up right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. But, you know, they really helped to create this platform that's Respect the Handmade, where I wouldn't say we got it wrong, but where we have learned and evolved tremendously in the last 6 months is there can be no set it and forget it in brand startup land, right? So one, the site experience is always evolving, and literally it's a marketplace. So the product changes every single day as we get new sellers and they upload new product, but really building the brand and social. So not thinking about it as like, oh, we have a good series of online video that's going to run to build this brand. We've pivoted. And funny, you mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk. We're working with the VaynerX team on this. And I am learning every day from these guys on like, no, it's not like the 10 perfectly crafted social ads. It is 50 social ads.
Yep.
And we test them in a little sandbox campaign that runs for a week or two. And then the ones that are good get promoted into the main campaign.
It's not rocket science. It's test and learn and action over perfection, and just create and organic, and don't overthink it and don't overcreate, right? That's how the magic is made.
You got it. Right. And don't be like, oh, well, we can get like all of us in a room and look at that email or that social ad with 15 opinions to niggle it to what we think is perfect. It's like, or we could do 50 of them in the next 3 days, and the internet will tell us which ones are good or not. So
we have the greatest.
You can go so much faster.
The greatest, test pool in the history of the world is the internet there. So what's next for you and the team on the Michael's horizon? Give us some alpha here. for all those
Yeah,
creative,
so
crafty folks?
on the Michael side, we are going into what I'm biased, but I think our most exciting time of the year. So
It's the
Halloween is
most
in stores
wonderful time.
already. And then obviously holiday
All
is
those fall
huge
stuff.
for
It's
us.
time. Get those glue sticks ready. We're ready. The hot glue.
Yes, exactly. Like you can make your own, you can come in and find decor. We have all new Christmas trees in the collection this year. Those are actually already just hitting this week, which is it's crazy. It's August, but people
Right.
are looking for them
The
already.
show's going to air in early October, so the timing will work out great. We're going to be
Oh,
right there.
perfect.
Perfect. So, yeah, we're talking about it in August, but when you're hearing this, it's going to be October, guys. So, happy Halloween and head over to Michael's for all of your holiday, all of your.
You got it. You
I,
got it.
I want to, I want to,
So it's fun.
I want to kind of bring it home here. But before I do, I love talking to senior executives like yourself because I get to ask around hiring. So, when you're interviewing, by the time someone gets you, Mandy, obviously they have the experience for the role that they need. They've already come through the process. But what is your kind of go-to questions to really assess who they are and if they would really add to the fabric of your team?
So a few things. I think the question depends a little bit on the role because I always start with the current makeup of the team versus the task we're trying to get done. And I'm a big believer in like high performing team with the right skills, not that every single person has to have the same set of skills. Like I'd rather have experts.
Complementary skills where people
Yes,
could fill
exactly.
others.
Yeah, so
So how do
where
you
we
get there?
can sort of round it out. I usually ask a lot of open-ended, more experience-based questions. So like tell me about like if I'm interviewing for a brand manager role, I'm probably going to ask about like tell me about a time that you created a campaign rooted in consumer insight and sort of what that process was like. If we're doing a lot of change, I'll ask people like tell me a time when you had to lead, again if it's a more senior role, where you had to lead an organization through a significant change. And then you can ask lots of questions of like how did you approach this, what would you do differently if you were going back to redo that now? And I think a lot of times it is the softer skills, but they'll come out through very specific examples. I don't do a lot of theoretical questions of like, well, what if this or what if that? Because most people will answer those things pretty well. I more really want to get to like behavior is the best predictor of what you're going to do in the future. So tell me about times that you've done that, and it'll help you unpack someone's thought process based on how they approach something and what they choose to tell you about it. But you can also get a lot of vibe of like, what is this person like to work with based on how they describe the role they played and other people
I
played,
like
how
that.
they overcame challenges, how they overcame challenging relationships to be able to get to the goal. So like often, even if it's like a 45-minute interview, I may literally start with like that one question. And then that's all we talk about for
And
like
just see what
35 minutes.
and see how they handle it. I really like that approach, and the answers that I get from senior executives like yourself is very similar. It's like let's have an open ended conversation. I want to hear about you, who you are, and really get a feeling of that. So let's bring it home here. How do you do it all? You know, at this stage, how do you balance travel? You know, leading this big organization, 3 kids at home. What's your secret?
And I don't know if it's any secret. It's being intentional.
Lots of
And I will say, I learned this. Yeah, lots of coffee. I have had an opportunity probably to learn this from a variety of coaches and bosses and other people. You can't have it all. So I think it's about being very clear on priorities and then making them a priority, planning in your time. So I travel differently than I used to travel. I mean, I have the luxury that I mainly go to the same place. Most of the time I have a place there. I have my workout places that I do.
Yeah,
So I don't
you're
treat it
set.
as a business trip. I'm like trying to like go to Whole Foods and get a salad and go to a workout class,
Yeah.
get my runs in, because I've learned if I'm not doing those things, if I'm not sleeping well, everything else goes on tilt and I can't be the best. Like sleep, I don't know how, like in my 20s and 30s, I could like work all the night, go to work, do the thing, go out, do all of that. Like mid 40s, let me tell you, like sleep matters. So I've
Oh
made that a
yeah.
big priority. And we get the luxury of our kids are a little bit older, so they're not like waking us up in the middle of the night most of the time.
That what a game changer that was, right? When I tell my
Right.
friends with little kids, I'm like, I'm telling you, it gets better. And once my 6-year-old, like, you get it. Like once that sleep through the night, it's like
Oh yeah, you're like, I feel like a new person. It's
I'm back to
amazing.
being a human. I'm back to being a human.
Uh-huh.
We
Uh-huh.
do
And you
it.
don't even realize at the time. And I think even when I look at some of the travel jobs I used to do, I'm like, oh my gosh, really when COVID hit, and we worked like crazy throughout COVID, but just being in one place, I was like, oh my gosh, I've
Oh.
been like chronically exhausted for a decade, like here, there, and everywhere. So I think part of it is being intentional about the way, like I will not do a work dinner every single night when I go, even if I'm at a conference, whatever. I'm super intentional that I'm going to do a bit of that, but I know I need the downtime to just like regroup and sleep and work
Refresh.
out. And I'll say same thing, like I have the luxury that my job is pretty hybrid right now. So when I'm in Dallas, I'm pretty full on working and like FaceTiming with the family and stuff. But then when I'm home, like I'm home. So when my kids come home from school at 3 o'clock today, they're going to pop their heads in my office and say
Hi.
hello. Whether I'm on a call or not, they ignore that the computer, like it could
No.
be the board, and they're like, hey, I need to talk to you now. So in that way, I think I sort of have a gift on that. But yes,
I
we're
love
all
it.
busy. Everyone's busy.
Oh,
It's just
busy.
about deciding what your priorities are. And then frankly, what I don't do, I don't really watch movies. I don't watch TV. I don't scroll that much on social media outside of it being for work. So I try to not have, I don't know. I know that is relaxation for a lot of people. For me,
Choose
that is not relaxation.
whatever
It's
you
like
need to do.
mind numbing. So I try to find, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to listen to a podcast while I do that. I'm going to go, do something with my kids, where I have the free time. So it's just not letting stuff
Love
like
it.
leak in.
Thank you. So let's bring it home here. What is that single greatest piece of advice that you've received that you take action on every day? A mantra, something you say when you first wake up or first start working.
I don't know if it's a mantra, but one that was super eye-opening for me was the idea of doing something from a fueled place, not an I have to place. So let me give you an example. I have a lot of meetings. I will sit on this computer for 8 hours in meetings, which is not the most energy giving thing in the world sometimes. Especially like I thrive being with people. The reframe that I got from a coach was, okay, even think of like the worst meeting you have. How is that in service of the goal you're trying to achieve? And reframe it that it's like, okay, if we're going to do, whatever this conversation is, that's like, oh my gosh, that's an hour and I'm going to sit here on this computer. Always being intentional of like, I get to do this thing because it's helping me do this, or like put it on a workout. Like if I do not feel like going for my run, it's like, no, I get to go for a run and I'm choosing to do that because I know at the end of the week, I'm going to feel way better if I stick to that routine than if I go just at 7 a.m., sit at my desk and start typing. So I would say that's the biggest thing, is just coming at things from, again, that abundance place of like, I get to do this and I'm choosing to do it for this reason. And then frankly, if you can't come up with a reason you're doing it, probably you shouldn't be doing it.
I love it. It's always kind of auditing the ROI of what you're doing in your time. And it always, for me, it kind of comes back to time. We all have the same amount of hours and minutes and seconds in a day. It's how do you use them to be most effective. So, Mandy, last but not least, you've had an incredible career, journey, mom, kind of doing it all. How do you define success?
Well, I think it's different for every person, but for me, honestly, it's happiness, which for me links to family being in a good place, friends being in a good place. And for me, I mean, not overstating, I am obsessed with growth, learning new things, doing new things, transformation. So for me, success is like, as long as I feel like I'm growing, which is then partly what makes me happy, for me, that is success.
I love it. Mandy, I want to thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and just hanging out with me and my audience on the podcast today. I want everyone to check out the new Handmade Good Marketplace, Maker Place by Michaels, and you can check it out at michaels.com/makerplace. And shop Michaels for everything creative, anything. Check it out. It's one of the best stores. We love going there with the kids. You know where to find it at michaels.com. Mandy, anywhere else can folks connect with you? LinkedIn?
Yeah, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. That's probably in social the best place to find me. So yeah, thank you for listening, and thanks for having me, Adam.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And everyone out there, if this show resonated with you, leave a review, rating. It goes a long way. Sharing means caring. You know where to find out more at thepodcast.com. Follow us on all the social media channels. Remember, be good to yourself, be better to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.